Is Green Seed around?
Can you hear me okay, David?
I can hear you, yep.
That's cool. I see Shane's here, but he's muted at the moment. No comment.
No, it's being recorded. Last thing we want to do is comment. Hey, Alan, I sent you a text to give me a call.
I've got my cell phone turned off.
Yeah, I realised that. So that's fine. Yeah. Well, just waiting for. G'day, Leo. How are you?
I'm good. Hello, sirs. How are you?
Greetings.
I'm here, but I don't think the rest of the team is.
We're just dying to hear from you, Leo.
I knew you would be. Yes, I'm not sure about the rest of the team, sirs.
They've all left the cause. They were intense questioning this morning. They've all abandoned ship.
They've just left it to me.
Sorry, just to let people know that some of our team are just making their way back to the boardroom, so we should be with you shortly.
Well, that's all right. We can wait.
It's quite interesting with the cell phone, David. The last video, or the last virtual hearing I had to deal with the cat jumping up on the table. But fortunately, the other participants had a good sense of humour. This time I felt I don't need anything, so the door to the office is shut, the cell phone's off, and now the guy next door is mowing his lawn. I can't win.
That's what comes with living in the suburbs, isn't it? It's what I like about living in the central city. You don't hear lawnmowers. Nobody's got a lawnmower down here.
Yeah, I probably left myself wide open for that, didn't I?
Yes. So, Leo, are you still driving around in that big gas guzzler?
No, I changed it to a big orange version.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Yeah, you really should go electric, if you want to maintain your credibility.
Yes, that's happening next year, actually. Yes, that's the next one. Yeah. No, big change is happening.
I was hoping the prices might come down a bit, but there's no show of that.
Yeah, slightly, but that is the big change is starting to happen.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I don't know where your team is. Their timekeeping is about as good as it was in the first session.
We were about 4.
You're in the dark. You're in the dark as usual, Mr. Berry.
I don't think 10 to the hour is something that lawyers could deal with. They need to have it much plainer than that.
It's 6 to the hour. Yes. Righto.
So apologies for that, sir. We were about 3 mouthfuls of falafel.
Yeah, right. That's all right.
I signalled before the break that we'd go on to Mr. Hills, but I'd forgotten about.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mr. Berry, I only left Mr. Wojciechowski on the list because I wasn't sure whether there was any late breaking stuff coming from council. And obviously there isn't, and matters are pretty much all agreed. So I'm not sure we need to hear from him now.
Okay, I appreciate that, sir. Do you want to just check that with Mr. Sharman?
Yeah, Mr. Sharman, are you there? Craig? I mean, I don't think there are any infrastructural issues related to water and so on left, are there?
No, there aren't. There's a really good level of agreement there between the technical experts on stormwater, and then in terms of the way it plays out in district plan provisions, that was worked through in caucusing as well, and all parties were agreed. So,
yep. simple yes would have been good for that, but that's all right. Always sharp after lunch.
We had the thought during the lunch adjournment that
I didn't get that, Simon.
sorry.
Just repeat that. It was a bit garbled on the connection.
Okay, we were just having a discussion during the lunch and adjournment as to as the most efficient way to run this afternoon. And we wondered, and it was just an idea to float with you, sir, that because the issues that remain in contention from a planning perspective are all transportation issues, we might be in a situation in which either you ask a bunch of questions of Mr. Hills that then need to be asked from a planning perspective, or whether what we do is have Mr. Hills present a summary and our planners present their summary, and then we do the
Just open it up.
backwards and forwards thing.
Yep. Yeah, well, I'm quite relaxed about doing it that way. Let me. Shane's nodding. Alan, you happy to do it that way?
Yep, no, always happy.
Good. And thank you for reminding me to be efficient, Mr. Berry.
Yeah. So at that point, I'll invite Mr. Hills to present his summary or his highlights package to you.
Can I just check? We're dealing with rebuttal as well at this point?
Yes, sir. I think we're just dealing with everything at once.
Yep. Good. Okay. Right, Mr. Hills, where you go? Oh, just a minute. Just before you start there, I should formally enter on the record the Waikato Regional Council's letter of the 8th of October, which they've asked to have tabled, which I assume has been distributed. Can I just check whether that letter's been distributed to all parties?
Yeah, we've got that, sir.
Okay. I mean, it's apropos of the discussion we had just beforehand, and will be relevant to Mr. Hills as well, which is on public transport amongst other matters. So, all right, thank you. Yep, Steve's got his thumbs up. Thank you, Steve. Right, Mr. Hills.
Thank you, sir. Afternoon. Now, I just check, have you received a copy of a summary statement, a separate summary statement from me?
That came in this morning.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So I'll refer to it. I don't intend to read it out completely, but there obviously are some very key statements in there, which I'd like to go through. But just to, I think, firstly acknowledge there has been a significant, through the expert caucusing, a number of the issues we have come to agreement on, which has been really good. And I think it's now down to, I think, as you've already heard, 2 or 3 issues that are really relating to the external impacts of the plan change. So if I may, if you have got that summary statement in front of you, I think it's probably, if I am able, I'll just simply start at 2.3 if that's okay.
Right.
So there are a number of upgrades required at the outset to support the residential development at PC7. Now, I'll just go through them briefly. There is the construction of the roundabout at State Highway 39 at the new Collector Road, and that's only one intersection. You may have seen previously there used to be 2 proposed, now 1. Yeah. Construction of road frontages along Exelby, and that's the eastern side only, and Burbush Road, and that's on both sides. And that's when the first connections are made to these roads. And C, and in fact, this one's almost the most important, walking and cycling connections from the plan change to existing walking and cycling network. And that includes to effectively a State Highway 1, which has got a separated active mode path included. Yeah. Other upgrades are required, in particular, Burbush Road, Exelby Road link. And now, before I go on further, in terms of, I know you maybe haven't visited the site in detail, but I refer to Burbush Road as an Exelby Road link as, obviously Burbush Road's pretty clear, but when I say Burbush Road, Exelby Road link, I'm meaning Exelby Road south of Burbush, because Exelby, just to hopefully make that clear. Yeah. And the upgrades also Exelby Burbush intersection. However, these, in my opinion, not required until at least 500 dwellings are established in the plan change area, or until access is provided to PC7 to Burbush Road. And that's a slight change that's come through in the expert caucusing, where that link to Burbush Road is quite key when the development links to that road. And that's reflected in the current provisions. In my opinion, the revisions to PC7 provisions, and that's outlined Ms. Tolamash and Mr. Fraser-Smith, appropriately address, respond to the traffic and transportation matters, and then include appropriate triggers implemented in a timely manner. Now, I note there will be cumulative traffic impacts on the roading network surrounding PC7 from both the development and others planned in the local and wider area. And thus, and this is where the difference lies, I guess, I do not consider the required transport upgrade should be the sole responsibility of PC7. And this is particularly Exalby Road, Rotakari Road intersection, and that's to the south.
Yeah.
And in this regard, I note the council's a range of tools that can be used to fund and implement these upgrades in an equitable manner, including development contributions and targeted rates. And in terms of this, is probably where it's key, following the joint witness statements and the expert caucusing, the items that are, I suppose, still outstanding in regards to, I've got 3 of them there. Interesting, the third one, from my review of the latest Annexure B of the planning reply evidence in terms of council's position is actually that no longer applies. So the key, so I'll just go through them individually. The first one is what I mentioned previously, Rotakari Road, Exalby Road intersection, and Exalby Road, north of Burbush Road. And I'm just making sure that's clear. It's not Exalby Road all the way, it's just where it's Exalby Road north of Burbush. The form of Exalby Road Burbush intersection upgrade, although we'll talk about that in a minute. And the final one, there was some discussion in the joint witness statement, and I'll put it in my reply evidence, expressing a potential concern about the final upgrade on Exalby Road, South Burbush Road. My understanding, reviewing the Annexure B, that council, their side of things, that no longer is an issue. So just going through those, the reasons I set out in my evidence in chief and a reply, the traffic generated by PC7 does not result in the requirement to upgrade Rotakari Exalby Road intersection and Exalby Road north of Burbush Road. While there is agreement between myself and Mr. Black regarding the trigger Exalby Burbush, there was previous discussion about what you may have seen in the evidence where Mr. Black considered a roundabout was required, and I said a priority controlled intersection. Through the joint witness statement and discussions, I now understand Mr. Black agrees that this can be a priority intersection. That's Exalby Burbush. In terms of the ultimate upgrade of Exalby Burbush, I have provided some commentary in my reply, and I consider the proposed upgrade to be appropriate. I've got no outstanding issues with Wakatahi. I believe those have been sorted. The number of matters raised by Mr. Peering relating to that are unsolved. This is relating to the surrounding neighbour submitters. I have gone through those in length in my reply evidence. I consider Ms. Peering's issues are unfounded or overstated and or are covered in proposed provisions. And in paragraph 2.9 above, Mr. Black and myself in agreement to most of these upgrades necessary to address the effects. And overall, I consider PC7 acceptable and appropriate use of the site from a transport planning perspective, and no reasons from that perspective for the proposed zoning not to be approved. I might just slightly, couple of extra things that's come out today. In terms of public transport, this is an issue that comes up every single plan change pretty much I deal with. in this case,
So you're going to give us your bulk standard answer, are you, Mr. Hills?
yeah, do you know it? Yes. Yeah, you
Yes.
probably, yes, I'm sure you do. It's a regional council responsibility in terms of, in this case, for public transport. What we can do though, and it is in in terms of one of the figures going to be attached, is effectively outline where a likely public transport route will be, but also just let you know that all collector roads proposed can accommodate public transport in terms of the public transport route, but obviously no developer can really control public transport, and it's always a bit of a chicken and egg thing in that you can't, from day one, it's very difficult to put a public transport route into a development simply because it won't really pick anyone up. So there needs to be a reasonable amount of I suppose dwellings constructed and basically running to actually provide a reasonable service. So it is always an issue, but not an unusual issue. I just, in terms of, just let you know, in terms of my rebuttal evidence, in terms of the matters of disagreement that are remaining, it really relates to paragraphs 3.31 and 3.34 of my rebuttal in terms of when I address those issues. And it's really, in terms of Exalby north of Burbush, all the modelling runs that we've done over the years show that that section of road, the traffic doesn't really increase relating to Plan Change 7. And I suppose I'm first to acknowledge that traffic modelling is never 100% accurate. And you've probably heard me say this before in a few, but I suppose
nonetheless, you still stand on it.
Yes, exactly. No, look, it's one tool, and in this case, all the model runs we've done show it's effectively there's no real change to that link in terms of traffic volumes, and it's not changing the nature of the road. Whereas Burbush and Exalby South, the reason I'm recommending an upgrade, and which is agreed with council, is it does materially change the operation of that road. It puts it up to a collector road type standard, and that is a noticeable change and does require an upgrade. Even though I think I've noticed it is going to be a temporary upgrade, realistically. Over the years, the middle bit's going to be filled in, I guess. But that's the difference in my opinion is simply the modelling. It's not that the modelling shows a growth that's just below the level that may be a collector road status on that Exalby north of Burbush. It shows no real change in any of the modelling we've done. In terms of, so that's the one issue. The other one is the Exalby Rotakari intersection right down the bottom. If you're aware of the area, it's quite close to, it's right on the border of the development known as Rotakari Rise, which is part of stage 1. I suppose when I reviewed that and in terms of modelling we've done, there are a number of things in that regard. First of all, the modelling and the analysis I've done shows the intersection in terms of capacity wise, as it is at the moment, is still appropriate. But I suppose more in that regard, there is a lot, obviously that's 3 kilometres away, and there's a lot happening in Rotakari South relating to Rotakari Rise and the others of stage 1 Rotakari that's going to both add traffic to that intersection, but also add new links in that whole area, which is going to change a number of traffic patterns in the longer term. So my opinion, that's the modelling doesn't really show it needs an upgrade in terms of capacity. There's no safety record of note there at the moment. And to me, it's a cumulative effects issue associated with a number of plan changes and developments in the wider area, but particularly actually Rotakari South End.
Yeah.
So that's probably...
If stage 1 Rotakari had actually preceded, or may still do, but if it preceded this one, presumably that issue would already have been resolved by the time this came along.
Yes, well, what would happen and may happen is that is actually right, that intersection is right in the middle of Rotakari stage 1. So it is at the moment, if you know the intersection, it's obviously it's a rural priority intersection with the right turn bay. So as development happens, just like it has happened, further towards where Rotakari has eventually those intersections get upgraded to urban effectively. So there's a mindful of obviously not wasting resources as well. But yes, that is correct. So that was, but obviously happy to answer questions, but that's probably I think the extent of my presentation in terms of it at this stage.
Yeah, no, that's good. Well, the suggestion is that we hear from the planner's summary, and then we we bubble you together if that's permissible.
That's fine.
I wouldn't mind putting a couple of questions to Mr. Hills just outside that process. Would that be okay?
Yes, well, fine for me.
Yeah, I just thought that your comment about Ms. Perring's evidence was a bit. You consider Ms. Perring's issues are unfounded or overstated. That could be turned back on yourself and say that your concern about her issues being unfounded or overstated, or perhaps overstated by yourself. I guess it's a comment as much as a question, but I think her evidence has helped direct us to the sorts of matters that might be of concern from a traffic point of view and the like. Would you concede that was the case?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. No, it wasn't. No, and it's been quite useful. She has been involved in the expert caucusing, and it's been very useful to have those opinions shared, I think, in terms of, and to go through some of those issues, really. So no, absolutely. Yes. I agree.
Yeah, I think Mr. David, I think it's just useful just to put that to Mr. Hills at the moment, because Mr. Tollemache really builds on that with some of his commentary, and it'd be better to try and squash that before it develops into anything more. But I think that's a fair concession. But yeah, happy to move on from there. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alan. Right. Well, Mr. Berry, who are you standing up, Mr. Tollemache, Ms. Fraser-Smith, both, neither?
Sir, Ms. Fraser-Smith will kick off and Mr. Tollemache will follow.
Right, good.
Lovely, thank you. And I assume also that our joint summary statement came through and you've had a chance to have a look through it and have a read.
You're going to have to try and project a little bit more. Your voice is a wee bit soft.
Very soft.
Sorry, but we just play musical chairs.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Well, all we need is the music by the looks of it.
Phantom of the Opera might be appropriate.
Okay, we'll try that one again.
That's good, much better.
Lovely. And so, just to confirm that our summary statement has been received and read, and if it's all right, I don't think we need to repeat the introduction.
Nope.
And so, just pick up very briefly.
So you're going to take us through your joint summary statement, are you?
Yes, if that's all right.
Right,
Yep.
sure.
And so if we pick up in section 2 in paragraph 2.1, it's just the summary of what the zoning proposal is, but also in clause C, just that a little bit of an indication about what is actually on the structure plan map itself, which is the key roads and the road and connections, those indicative neighbourhood parts, the green spine, and we've got an additional medium density overlay on top of our medium density zone.
That's your blue hatched area.
It is.
Yep.
And just in paragraph 2.2, the confirmation that there was an existing SNA, which was a significant natural area, and that is to be retained. And as you have heard through the presentation from Sunny and Mr. Hill, the plan change has proposed to rename that as an outcome of our Tangata Whenua working group. Paragraph 2.3, there are additional figures which form part of the structure plan maps and which are known as figures 2.9a and 2.9b. Those are our key infrastructure maps, and they link to provisions relating to infrastructure staging that are outlined in the district plan chapter 3. Paragraph 2.4 picks up on some of the rationale of the design that has led into the creation of the rules. And you've heard most of that through the evidence of Mr. Munro earlier.
Yeah.
And moving into section 3, and just that and paragraphs 3.1 through 3.2, just that confirmation and that we have concluded that there will be no significant actual or potential effects on the environment resulting from the urbanisation of the land that are not adequately addressed by the provisions, either through Plan Change 7 or as we've relied on by the existing provisions of the district plan. And through section 4 is just again confirmation that there is agreement on consistency with the higher order planning documents. Section 5 is just a summary of these the specific chapters of the district plan that were modified. So in chapter 3, which forms my paragraphs 5.2, 5.3, chapter 3 is really the section that outlines what our structure plan is and has explanation text as to what the features on the map are. As per the confirmation of Mr. Sharman, the only item outstanding within this section relates to what's known as Table 2 of the infrastructure provision relevant to transport. Chapter 4 is where our key land use controls and activities are for our residential zones. Again, Mr. Sharman has confirmed that there are no matters of disagreement with those. And sorry, if I may, just might be a good place here just to deviate slightly and to confirm that even though we've had a bit of a discussion this morning around the duplexes, the duplex provisions fall in chapter 4 at rule 4.14. They are there to confirm what the permitted activity criteria are. The current district plan identifies in the general residential zones duplexes are a restricted discretionary activity, and so they're subject to council's design criteria. What we've put forward as our permitted activity standards is a lot tougher than what exists currently for those RDs. And again, just that confirmation that there is no matters that are outstanding between us and council as to what those provisions should entail. Mark, did you want to add anything on that?
I think if I can on that, one of the things between Mr. Munro and myself is we've tested these duplex provisions quite considerably with the Oringa development and a number of developments in Auckland. And I take Mr. Munro's point that we're moving towards higher density outcomes, and rather than more subjective criteria, actually what Mr. Munro and I are interested in is some quite clear performance standards about how the duplexes will operate. We've reviewed a number of the duplexes that have been constructed around Hamilton and saw some what we thought were grounds for improvements, and that was also reviewing those with council when we were working through the workshop and design process with the council, looking at what is a better way to provide for this medium density product around duplexes. So there has been a considerable level of, I suppose, analysis to get to those rules, and you can see I mean, obviously you can apply for a different form of duplex, but in terms of this, the acceptable duplex design, they are quite directive in terms of what is considered to be an ideal outcome, particularly in terms of streetscape and the way that car parking is managed, rather than having an RD process, restricted discretionary process, which could bring in all sorts of other duplex designs, or better than a permitted status for duplexes, which could bring in a variety of outcomes which would not achieve the same level of streetscape and quality.
When you say you tested them, how do you mean you tested them?
So one of the things that we did with the council team and the urban design team was look at a number of approved duplex designs and built outcomes in terms of how they perform, they relate to the street, the proportion of garages versus glazing and front doors to street. What came apparent is there's a broad definition of duplex in the current district plan, which effectively allows for a duplex in a sausage flat form.
I thought you said you tested the provisions that you're recommending at this other development. And I was curious as to what that meant.
In terms of the Warringah development,
yes.
The evidence is about, I think, 50 to 75 of them are constructed, and a range of different duplex designs. The ones that we consider most address the street in a positive sense, glazing front doors to the street, a better car parking configuration, are the ones from that testing exercise in Warringah that we've recommended as the acceptable solution in that permitted activity rule.
Right. But not tested in the sense that you've got a bunch of developers sitting around the table, given them the provisions and said, right, how could you get around this, or how could you do something different?
I think more the converse, Mr. Munro and I testing, are the rules clear and stringent enough that you would not get that exercise of trying to get around them?
Yeah, no, that's fine. All right, that's good. Carry on.
Sorry, and just to pick up on that point, in our chapter 4, as per the activity table and amendments proposed by PC7, those duplex designs that can't meet the permitted activity standards do default to being a restricted discretionary activity. And sorry, so I'll go back on the script. And so moving through paragraphs 5.6 and 5.7 in relation to the council's subdivision chapter, again, just confirmation from Mr. Sharman this morning that there are no outstanding matters in relation to this chapter, and that we were able to resolve any of the residual concerns through our joint witness statements and caucusing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to go off script again slightly here, and just this confirmation through this subdivision chapter, and picked up from earlier comments from the commissioners to Mr. Munro about ensuring the outcomes of our structure plan. This really gets picked up in our subdivision chapter with the activity tables. So we've put ourselves a higher test than the usual Hamilton standards, and we've got the development controls relating to block size and lot size, lot depth, and we've got the block perimeters, and then we've got the activity table, which essentially locks those in, and we've got these key outcomes like a non-complying activity for a rear lot. We've got discretionary activity for use of a cul-de-sac. So that really drives home these key components of what it is we're trying to achieve through Greater Curry North.
Right.
Mike, nothing else to add for you on that?
I think on that, Mr. Chair, one of the things that we looked at, and obviously the experience that we've all had through the precinct plans in Auckland, and some of the precincts that have that escalating scale of provisions very much focused on urban block form, is we could not find, except for the objectives and policies and the subdivision design criteria in the plan, equivalent provisions which would direct or create quite an onus on those outcomes. And so it was a matter of assessment as opposed to there is a activity status compliance issue to this. And that's one of the key things in terms of creating much more certainty, but also the rigor of the process is to build that into the subdivision chapter, and that far exceeds and is more onerous than the standard subdivision approach applying to the remainder of the city. And from my perspective, that is deliberate because you've got a design outcome which has been explained to you as interconnected streets, a permeable network, a focus on pedestrian and cycle, highlighting those elements. But without actually a strong sense of policy, a strong sense of activity status in there, those matters can actually get lost in the general wash of the greater restricted discretionary items that apply to subdivision. So it's emphasising those points.
Okay, all right, we'll bear that in mind when we go through them. Yep.
Moving forward to paragraphs 5.8 and 5.9 in relation to chapter 25. And I don't know if you've tried to work through chapter 25. It is a very large chapter and contains a lot of citywide provisions. And the notified version contained a few changes relating to transportation, and in general, those were resolved through Council's own Plan Change 6 from our perspective. So there are no outstanding matters with chapter 25 remaining. With paragraph 5.10 in relation to Appendix 1, through our discussions on other matters, there are new information requirements that have been inserted into Appendix 1. And new matters of discretion or matters of assessment, in relation to Rotokauri North. And sorry, and I made the correction between discretion and assessment, and because these apply to restricted discretionary and non-complying activities equally. And that's in line with the setup of the Hamilton City District Plan. And my apologies, this morning I've noted that there is a minor error with the matter of assessment 07 in relation to service courts. There is a reference in there suggesting that would only apply to apartments with balconies. That is not the case. It is to apply to all apartments. And that matter was agreed through our joint witness statement, and my apologies, somehow the strike through has disappeared. And so I've been in touch with Mr. Sharman over that to confirm that that should be corrected.
Yep.
Just moving forward with 5.11 with the structure plan maps, and those are as per they're agreed, and there is an indicative public transport map that has been included, and that's come out of our joint witness statement for public transport. Appendix 9, there is no change from the notified version. Appendix 15 relates to transportation and...
Except for the name change, I seem to remember.
Yes, sorry, and so that remains as per the notified request. Yep. Paragraphs 5.13 in relation to Appendix 15 transportation, there are no outstanding matters in relation to the changes for parking. In paragraph 5.14, we have identified that through the Transport Triggers joint witness statement, there was agreement that we would put together a map to help identify where each of these upgrades actually related to, just to assist with everybody. And it was agreed that it should go into Appendix 15. Given that there is some disagreement between ourselves and the council at the moment, that map has not been finalised, but a version of that map was attached to Annexure 2 of our reply evidence.
As what? Just remind me which one it was.
Annexure 2 was the comparison of the transport trigger table, which showed the green seed triggers as outlined by Mr. Hills earlier, and then Hamilton City's position.
But what was the? I mean, I've got the I've got two up in front of me now. Which number map were you referring to?
In Annexure 2 to our reply evidence.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Annexure B. My apologies. That is that's
Right.
a type of Annexure B.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Right. So that's at the end of the text. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it's 1510. Right. Thank you.
Yes. Apologies. And so just as a summary in 5.15, just the notation that there are no other outstanding matters between ourselves and the in Hamilton City. The outstanding matters now relate to the relief sought through the evidence of Ms. Perring and what we're calling Table 2 of the Transport Trigger Rule. And so in Section 6, we went through to summarise from our reply evidence and the matters raised by Ms. Perring. And we did so to go through and just confirming in relation to our comments in section 6.1 down to 6.3. Is it, from our perspective, we reviewed the district plan, the existing Hamilton district plan, and we do not consider that there is a gap that actually needs filling or resolving through additional provisions relating to construction management. They are already adequately dealt with by the plan, and we see no reason why Rotokauri North should be dealt with any differently to any other greenfield area in Hamilton City.
Can I just check whether Ms. Perring is actually viewing us today, or is she not?
Her name is on the screen that I can see.
It's not on the screen that I've got, but that's fine. Ms. Perring, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
Chair.
good. Okay, I just
Good
wasn't sure whether you were listening in or not. That's fine.
Yes, I most definitely am. Thank you.
Okay, well, I thought you would be. I mean, clearly you'll pick these issues up and respond in due course when we get back together again.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay.
Paragraph 6.4, just a notation that PC7 cannot deal with the matter of speed restrictions. It's a Land Transport and a Local Government Act function. And paragraph 6.5 to 6.6, Ms. Perring's evidence requested some amendments to the objectives and policies in chapter 3, which is where the structure plan provisions are.
Mm-hmm.
And these paragraphs just outline the fact that these are not appropriate places to be putting these references, and that the concerns that she's raising are captured by other provisions already.
Yes.
And paragraph 6.7, and we noted that Ms. Perring asked very specifically for either a provision, a rule or a method or some other provision, which I'm sure she can speak to when she presents, but regarding a requirement for monitoring. In our review, when you go through the Hamilton District Plan, there is already a restricted discretionary activity status for providing an integrated traffic assessment. They have two, one's a broad and one is a simple. In either case, there are already the contents of your ITA form part of Appendix 15. And through the 42A recommendations, there are additional matters for a Rotokauri North ITA. And these actually cover things like the cumulative effects on the surrounding environment, which would pick up when you do your stage development as you're doing your ITAs. They're required to pick up your development and the surrounding environment. So these would suitably make sure that you aren't putting cumulative traffic effects onto the network without those being managed or mitigated. Mark, do you have anything to?
No.
Section section 7 is going through, and Mr. Hills has been through these in detail in terms of the difference between the Greenseed position and Hamilton City's position on the traffic outside of the Rotokauri in the area we're calling Table 2. But I think it's important to note that there is a high level of agreement already. We are talking about two upgrades now that are not agreed between Mr. Hills and Mr. Black. And those are, as per our paragraph 7.5 and talked to in detail by Mr. Hills, the Exelby Road, Rotokauri Road intersection and the Exelby Road north of Burbush Road. Sorry, I just got stuck a bit. Pardon? No. So, sorry, and the rest of our section 7 just covers off very similar comments to what you've heard from Mr. Hills as to why these upgrades aren't actually triggered by PC7. And to our Annexure B, my apologies, Annexure B with that trigger map, we might find that comes in quite helpful to look at when we're having any further questions on this in relation to where these upgrades are on that. So just in conclusion, as per our paragraph 8, we've considered that PC7 should be accepted and approved in the form proposed by our Annexure A to our reply evidence, with obviously the necessary amendment to correct the error identified in Appendix 1.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fraser-Smith. Ms. Talmash, anything to add to that before we bring Mr. Hills back in? Okay. Well, Alan, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, there's a few questions that come out of stuff. I just wanted to pick up on the original evidence that Ms. Fraser-Smith and Mr. Talmash provided. If I just bring that up, their primary statement of evidence, just matters of detail, but at the end of the day, most of this does come down to details in terms of the evidence. Or I can make a cynical comment and say I can understand you not being able to provide a summary of evidence when you run to 75 pages of evidence, but I'm not permitted to do, shouldn't make such remarks. I had a comment here at 12.4 of the primary statement of evidence. If I just bring that through, and it was really just getting an explanation around what you meant there. Yeah, you talk about submitter Mr. Rusk raises concerns with features appearing in the structure plan would have been moved or are not carried through into the Rotokauri North structure plan, which include a community focal point, reserves and road connection. What's your comment around that?
If I can, in terms of the so the Rotokauri structure plan illustrates a number of roads. It illustrates an east-west connection, and it illustrates a sports park, a very large 6-hectare reserve. Through the structure plan and workshop process that we undertook with Hamilton City Council, and that was 2 workshops, though the elements internally have altered to relate much more to the concept plan work, and the level of agreement around sports park is more ideally located to the east of the site, where there is an asterisk. Key road connections to the boundary, the collector road connections are retained to the boundary of the land immediately south. And obviously there's been more work done by Hamilton City around the minor arterial route, which is shortly going to proceed to a designation or in notice of requirement. So it was that level of design refinement from quite a high level structure plan to actually, here is the land holdings, here are the design outcomes that are known, here is the conversation with Waka Kotahi regarding the principal access point to the site, here's the desired connection. So it's really the evolution of the current operative structure plan to another level of detail. There has not been elements removed, I'd say, but they have been shuffled within the site to more appropriate locations.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that makes it a lot clearer in terms of compared to what you've got written there. So thanks, that's helpful. Just a bit further down on that, 12.10, and this is his business of safe access to the submitter's property, Ms. Van Asbeck. And there's various concerns. I mean, everybody's making comments, or the various witnesses are making comments about, we'll look after your interests, ma'am, don't worry about it. NZTA are in the box, they'll see you right, and everyone else will see you right. Is there any requirement or any onus on yourselves to consult with that submitter in terms of the design of that intersection, rather than just purporting to say that we'll look after you?
There is no specific rule or requiring that direct consultation. Obviously, the approach that we've outlined is the standard section 95 of the Act in terms of obviously the design, the review of the design in terms of the effects, and the effects, including those that could be limited notified of any, in that case, subdivision or roading proposal. That I haven't seen explicitly highlighted a mandatory requirement for consultation or a mandatory requirement for some form of notification. So the approach that we've taken is to adopt the standard requirements of the schedules and section 95 of the Act.
So, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Sometimes conditions of planning consents or resource consents often say that, and when I think of some of the Waka Kotahi requirements that we've looked at, they'll often talk about something will be designed or organised in consultation with a particular person. Not saying you need to do what they want you to do, but that you do that in consultation with them. When you look at the spread of submissions on this particular matter, this seems to be a specific concern, obviously to the submitter, but it's quite important in the context that it's close to that road intersection, that it's sorted out in a way that's safe and efficient from NZTA's point of view, but also that it works for that particular submitter, given that there's an existing access way there. What would be the difficulty of having some sort of provision in there that would be done in consultation with that submitter?
On yes, I'm quite familiar with that forming part of the resource consent requirement, because obviously at that point, a road required a consent, an intersection required a consent, the design details required a traffic assessment. So, I'm probably saying that suggestion around the condition of consent, around that process, around the resource consent itself, that's the appropriate place for consultation and active engagement with those landowners. And that more than likely would be a requirement of NZTA as well, given their responsibilities and the approvals required in terms of section 176 as well, and their obligations on access. Pulling in a specific requirement to a district plan, I see as actually a step too far, because it could be highlighting a matter that in practicality doesn't exist to the level of concern of, for example, a limited notified process. And that's where I've always taken the approach that these are the matters that are worked through in that detailed design of the resource consent. And that's the point where you can actually determine, based on your design, what the actual impact is, as opposed to the, I wouldn't say theoretical, but the more indicative intersections that are shown on a structure plan diagram.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for that. I think that's a very good answer, and it covers off the question, if not the concern. But Mr. Berry, is that a matter that you could address at some stage, or even have Mr. Hills give some advice from a traffic point of view, insofar as, you know, the intersection is going to be designed? It would be nice to know that the design of that intersection was going to be done at least in consultation with a submitter who is arguably affected by it, rather than just left in the dark as to saying, well, here's our design, this is the NZTA Model 3, this is what you want, rather than something that's just done in consultation with that person. And is that a matter that can be included in a structure plan, or is that too prescriptive?
Well, I think we obviously have a difficult requirement to agree, but we certainly, I mean, I think firstly it might be worthwhile hearing from Mr. Hills in terms of the feasibility of that from a technical perspective. But I think it'll be more, I mean, we're happy to address it in reply, sir, but if I don't think I'm going to be able to take it any further than the planners can.
Has anybody talked particularly to this lady at all?
I'll just double check on the consultation.
Yeah, you might want to come back to us on that, but it just seemed to be something that could, I think the concerns of some of the submitters could arguably be looked after in terms of some further discourse with them about what might be going to happen, because I get the feel from reading some of the submissions that here's an opportunity for them to express some concerns. If they can't get them sorted out at this stage, they are somewhat left out in the dark. There's no obligation on anyone to talk to them any further, despite, you know, the commitments obviously from the applicant's team that they're wanting to sort those details out. But I guess people have to stand up and be counted now. And I think that probably goes for a number of the concerns that Ms. Perring raises as well. It's a matter of perhaps how these people can be sure that at a future time, granted some of the concerns may be beyond this unit area, but how some of their concerns in terms of the impacts on traffic may be addressed. But I'd just raise that with you and leave it to you to, perhaps Leo Hills can respond to it, perhaps Mr. Berry, you can do something in reply, but I just leave that with you as a concern that comes to me as a hearings commissioner, having read the submissions.
Thank you.
Let me make an additional note on that. Of course, we're heading into a week's adjournment, which provides some opportunity for considering that and perhaps taking some action as well.
Yeah, I think that's a point well made, David. Point well made. I'm always get a bit concerned about expert witnesses when they very quickly defer to NZA standard such and such, or they refer to a section of the RMA or the like, and it's normally a sign that there's a point that they've done as much as they feel is necessary. But I think in dealing with some of the submitters' concerns on a matter like this, there's possibly a little more can be done, and maybe that's where the chair's suggestion that something's looked at over the next week. But anyway, I'll probably hammer that as much as I can. So no, that's me for the moment, David. Thanks.
Was it worth me making Leo here, just worth me making a comment just on that, particularly that roundabout?
Definitely.
If I can. Yes. I think I fully acknowledge that that issue came through, and particularly there's been a house built on that site recently, which obviously increases it in terms of the use of that access. You may have seen in my evidence in chief, I think it was, I haven't got the exact, but I have had a look at that and had a few options in relation to that access. But I agree with you, sir, in terms of, I suppose if it is me doing the design, I would talk to the person when it came to doing the detail. It's a little bit difficult. There's a few options that we could use. The one I've provided in my evidence, I think, is the best one in discussion with NZTA or Whakatāi. And we would, and if I was doing the design, I would talk to the owner in detail when it was known a bit more detail. I suppose one thing I would note, that roundabout's in the same location is where it was always intended to be in terms of the Hurakari structure plan. Just it's ended up exactly the same place in a sense, that roundabout. I do think there is a safe and efficient design for that driveway, and I've got some comments from Whakatāi expressing the same thing, and I think they have noted in their evidence as well.
So if you followed logically on from what you're saying, then it wouldn't be difficult to talk to the submitter and at least satisfy them that it's going to be looked after in the sort of manner that you and the planner's talking about.
That's fine. I think obviously there's some detailed design to come, and always is from when you're at a plan change stage. So there's always finer details to work through, but definitely conceptually, yes.
Thanks. That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Right. I guess now we're going back to you, Mr. Hills, anyway, on the,
Okay.
and I guess, is it just Annex 8 that we're now focused on, because that's the remaining point of disagreement, I think, isn't it?
Yes, well, effectively, obviously there's the other submitters side of things as well. But in terms of with council, there is those two remaining issues. Yes, sir.
So, I mean, I've got the latest Annexure B, I should say, not 8, isn't it? Annexure B.
I was going to ask you.
In front of me here, and I must say I'm having a bit of difficulty understanding how to read this. That I'm comparing the table, which is the applicant green seed position, it says, compared
in purple, sir?
With the one below, which is Hamilton City Council's position.
Yes. Should I just hopefully make it a bit easier for you?
Well, let's just look at the Hamilton City Council position, and you tell me.
Yes.
I mean, I think I know which ones aren't yours. But I just need to be clear which ones are not. Are 2 and 5 out, or are they in?
2, Exelby Road North, 2 and 5, you're dead on, are the 2 that are out, in my opinion.
In your opinion, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
And the others are exactly the same.
Yeah, right. So let's take each of those in turn. So 2 is out for you because you don't think the seal widening is either required or should have been done already, or something like that.
Correct, sir. It's in my opinion, in that piece of road, the traffic volumes relating to PC7 do not change the nature of that road. So I have mentioned in my reply, I think, I acknowledge there is some deficiencies in that piece of road, but I don't think
they're not your deficiencies, is what you're saying.
Yeah, correct, sir.
Right. Okay. And in 5, I think what's the issue with 5? Is it so far south that it's none of your business?
Very simply put, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I understand that. Fine. But just take me back a couple of steps, though. The way in which you've counted that 500 should be the threshold was what? That
was based on modelling we have done in terms of adding 500 dwellings as a first step of the network modelling that was done. Having a look to see where that modelling went. And at 500, it wasn't materially, it was getting to the point where it started to, but wasn't materially changing the nature of that road in terms of, changing it from a local to a collector road. But one thing you may have noticed on that provision, and this came out in the caucusing, as soon as you do put a link to Burbush Road from the site, that does. So you'll see it's whenever there is a link there, that triggers it straight away. Yeah, right. So that's why you've got the either or in the provision. The or is critical. Yes, sir. Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. All right. I understand that. Any other, Shane? Have you got any matters you want to raise on the traffic transport and planning provision issues?
Just Mr. Hills. In your evidence in paragraph 2.6, the upgrade, apart from Hamilton City, who else did you have in mind to make contributions? Typically, it would be other developers. And that's it, really. And just in regard to what Commissioner Watson spoke about regarding the concerns of submitters, the Green City philosophy from Mr. Nolan was to engage with stakeholders, and that would include the local landowners. So I would imagine there was ongoing engagement with those relevant submitters.
I personally haven't been in ongoing engagement, but that might be a question put to him more than me in that regard.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan, any finals?
Yeah, well, that may be a point that legal counsel wants to respond to. I think Shane is absolutely correct in saying, that's part of the philosophy that we've read about and been told about today. So Mr. Berry's hopefully taking that on board. I only had one other matter. I mean, I've got a whole series of notes. I mean, there's numerous statements of evidence and the like, and I'm just making sure I'm on the right statement of evidence, Mr. Hills, but Mr. Tollemache's evidence or the joint statement at 10.99, and it's referring to the joint witness statement regarding stormwater, and a key issue raised by Mr. Clark in relation to this clause is talking about the design of the stormwater. And just a question, Mr. Tollemache, it says, however, a new matter of discretion could be provided to further alleviate the concerns of Mr. Clark. Are you actually suggesting that? Is that picked up in the attachment D? If you're on the same wavelength of me at the moment?
Sorry, may I answer?
Yeah, no, that's fine. If you go to 10.99.
So as part of 10.99,
Yep.
we include that matter of discretion
Yep.
and the attachments to the primary evidence. Since the primary evidence, the council have confirmed, our team has been in touch with the council, and the council we've had an update to that matter. And
Yep.
so matter of discretion that is agreed between all parties is what is provided in the reply evidence annexure A.
Okay, no, that's great. That responds to it perfectly. Thanks very much. No, that pretty much picks it off for me, David. I think in terms of what Leo Hills has provided in evidence is it's a moving feast of things are slowly, the concerns are slowly being closed off on many of those concerns. And I think some of the concerns that have been raised by submitters do lie outside this unit area of the structure plan. And it's a matter of where that sort of meets the council's aspirations in terms of what the council's doing in that wider area as well. But no, I'm pretty happy with what I've heard there. That's responded to the questions I've got. So thanks.
All right, thank you. And I'm taking it as given that the relevant people from council, apart from Craig Sharman, are sitting in the background there listening, or will pick up issues as we go through. Yeah, I mean, I'm not. Where am I? I'm looking at about 5 different screens here. I'm not anticipating that we're going to go line by line through conditions or provisions, I should say, at this point in time. So I'm not going to question on those ones. I think probably productively, we're probably at a point where the requester's case is put. Mr. Berry?
Yes, sir. I don't think, subject to checking with my team right now, that there's nothing arising out of the data that we can address, then that does complete our case other than to reserve our right of reply after we've heard from the submitters to the council.
Good, thank you very much for that. And I, just looking at timing, no, timing's fine. I think Waka Kotahi, I think, are standing by. I think that Mike Wood and Duncan Tyndall are with us, are they? I think Duncan is, certainly. Yep. Yeah. Oh, there's Mike. Right.
Hello.
Well, over to you two in terms of, are there any outstanding matters that you want to put raise with us?
So Mike Wood here. I think all our issues have now been resolved as a result of our involvement through the conferencing. So we're fairly satisfied. I just picking up on the point that was made about the roundabout. It'd be my experience that they would need to enter into an agreement, a design agreement, which would encompass that landowner. I've just checked as we've been speaking, trying to get hold of our solicitor as to what legislation, maybe under Land Transport Act, provides that requirement. I would say that my experience is that would be a matter of course where we're impacting on access, existing arrangements, that they would be part of that agreement.
That's certainly my experience in the past from dealing with state highway issues. So yeah, all right. Duncan, have you got anything that you want to add?
Just to confirm with what Mike said there, which is that during the witness conferencing, all of the matters were addressed.
Right. Well, any questions from Alan and Shane on no further action required?
Yeah, no, nothing from me. Thanks, David. I think that's all right. I guess the submitter on the potential road intersection will, one day she'll see Mr. Hills standing out there with his white coat. Oh no, he'll have his HAS jacket on, won't he? And he can tell her that he's designed a roundabout that or road intersection that's just perfect for her. Thanks.
No, I'm fine.
Right. All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think that's as far as we're probably going to go today. As I indicated, Steve, are you online somewhere?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Steve. Where have you got? I mean, in terms of a preliminary stab at a reconvened hearing, either virtually or some other way, next Thursday, I think you are suggesting the 28th.
Correct.
Have you been able to sort of confirm that with the relevant parties that they are available that day?
The applicants said they're available and yourselves are available, and the submitters that I need to deal with for the appearance have not expressed any dates that they're not available.
Okay, all right. Can I just check with Ms. Perring? Would you be available next Thursday, the 28th?
Yes, I would.
Okay, all right. And do you know if your clients are generally available also?
No, I haven't had an opportunity to go back to them and ask them yet.
All right. Well, look, that being the case, we'll stand adjourned now until we meet. Well, most of us will be virtual, but those hopefully, I haven't heard the news on 1 o'clock today as to what the numbers are, so I don't know whether it's going up or down at the moment for the Waikato, but fingers crossed that your Waikato is in too next week and the submitters can get together in a group. But otherwise, we will convene virtually and deal with the issues. And at that point, we'll also hear back from council. And I guess if we can get through it on the same day, Mr. Berry, I'm not sure whether you have given any thought to reply at this point.
Well, other than issues that have arisen today, and I've made a note of a number that we would want to give you some further information on.
Mm-hmm.
We can certainly have that ready for next week. And perhaps orally reply to what occurs on the day and file something in writing a few days later.
Yeah, that would be quite acceptable. Absolutely. All right. Well, unless Alan, Shane, have you got anything else that you want to note before we sign off for the day?
No, that's all good by me. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Shane. Thank you. Well, we should close then. I don't know. Sonny, do you want to do a closing just for form's sake? If you're still there? No. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And I appreciate the virtual hearings are not the easiest things to negotiate, but thanks for your time today. And you'll hear from Steve in due course confirming when we next resume. So we're adjourned for the moment. Thank you very much.
Cheers.